This is the Daily Technology Pulse podcast. Welcome aboard.
Welcome to another episode of the Daily Technology Pulse. Once again, I'm Rick from Daily. Oh, wait a minute. That's not right. I think I've always been Rick from Daily. I digress on that. Today's episode features a topic that should be top of mind for just about everyone and anyone. We're going to be talking about email security, and boy, do some of us really need that topic. But before we go there, let me tell you a little bit about Daily. Many people in the state and local government and education space know Daily for being a premier provider of computers and peripherals and stuff like that. And of course, we certainly are. But did you know that we're also a premier provider of other technology like audiovisual solutions? If you don't know that, you should. Just visit our website, www.daly.com, and visit our solutions page to learn more about all the great stuff we do. Now, just want to give a quick reminder that your feedback on the Technology Pulse is always welcome. You can reach out to me directly. Shoot me an email at ricko@daily.com. All right, now that I have all that out of the way, let's get to our program. Today, we are joined by Thorsten Stoeterau, who is a solutions architect for Daily's strategic partner, Barracuda. Thorsten is going to school us on email security. Thorsten, welcome to the Technology Pulse.
Rick, thank you so much for having me.
Before we start getting into the topic of email security, which is a huge topic, and I know a lot of people are going to be very interested in, I want to talk a little bit about you because you came about your position at Barracuda and when I say a very roundabout way, we're almost talking like a very roundabout the world kind of way.
Yeah, literally and figuratively. I grew up in Germany. And in 2001, I decided to take a dive and apply for a job on board of mega cruise ships as a traveling IT manager here in the US. And that worked out well for 7 years. In those 7 years, I had a ton of experiences on the seven seas and ultimately met my wife. At that point, my company that I worked for made me an offer to move to the United States, and I would be put in charge of building new built cruise ships, do all the IT facets, all the network, all the satellite pieces. And I did that for a year or two, and then was hired by another cruise line as enterprise architect, where I was responsible for the entire infrastructure. At that point, we were Barracuda customers, and I had a lot of experience with their sales folk, with their support team. We liked the stack that they had. And through some interesting twist of fate, the vice president of sales for the East Coast literally fished me away from my then current employer and made me move over to Barracuda.
That is absolutely fascinating. Now, I have to ask this. I know this has nothing to do with our topic, so forgive me for going off on a tangent. But I'm really curious, what does an IT system on a cruise ship, what does that even entail?
One of the things that is really well hidden from passengers on cruise ships is really what is happening behind the scenes. And when you think about those newer generation mega vessels that carry 5,000 passengers and maybe 2,000 crew members, imagine just from an IT perspective, how many endpoints are on that ship. And I'm not talking about only the voice over IP telephones in the cabin. I'm talking about thousands of wireless access points to give connectivity to the passengers. I'm talking about redundant satellite uplinks to make sure we have connectivity to the rest of the world. You're talking about points of sale systems in every single venue on board. You're talking about all the handhelds that passengers and crew are using. We had roughly 7,000 endpoints that were administered ultimately by the small IT department on board. And I was lucky enough to head that IT department.
So now transition, how does one go from onboard a ship IT operations to email security evangelist?
So my entire professional life, I had a soft spot for email. I have just developed this fascination with the underlying protocol. It is so simple, yet it is so powerful. We realized that relatively quickly when I took the plunge to work for Barracuda as a solutions architect, that hobby could turn into my field of specialty here. That's how I got into the email security. That's how I got into Office 365 protection. It's a 20 plus year hobby that now turned into profession.
And I'm sure over those 20 plus years, you have seen a lot of changes in email security. Would it be possible for you to give us sort of this high level overview of what you've seen maybe in just the past few years?
So from a 30,000 foot perspective, when you think back 10 years, email security, there was really two things that were threatening or annoying. It was spam, which we all consider really, really annoying, and there was viruses. So a couple of years ago, email security was simple. You had to intercept emails, scan them before you deliver them to the email server if there's something bad in there, or if it looks like it was trying to sell little blue pills, just block it. But the problem has gotten different. It has gotten different insofar as the attackers have realized that viruses are easy to stop. Even 0 days that are unknown, there is sophisticated sandbox algorithms that try to understand if this attachment is doing something bad. They have moved over to what we consider social engineered attacks. And that's probably the biggest change in email security, that more and more attacks try to aim between the ears of a recipient to do something stupid. If you think about it, there is this example. Somebody in payroll gets an email from the CFO that says, hey, I need to change my payroll direct deposit. And the person in payroll doesn't think anything bad about it. Humans are trusted by nature, and sends the payroll change request to what the payroll employee thinks is the CFO. But it was really a social engineered attack. The next payroll for the CFO gets sent to another account there. From an industry perspective, we've gone away or are trying to reduce the amount of emphasis that we put on traditional threats. And we're throwing things like artificial intelligence and machine learning into the mix to understand that email that went to poor Jill in payroll did not come from the real email address that the CFO normally uses. And in addition to this, the way that that message was written does not match the underlying linguistic fingerprint that the CFO emails with. So we're looking a lot less at artifacts like attachments or URLs. We're looking a lot more into the text itself, trying to understand if it tries to make the recipient do something stupid.
Obviously, we talk about spam filtering, and it really is almost laughable these days what some of the traditional spammers are trying to get into your inbox. What are the ones I get all the time now? You've won a gift card from Home Depot. And what's really frustrating to me is I'm constantly reporting those messages as spam, and I keep getting them. So I have to wonder if they're not really paying attention to when people are reporting things as spam.
Here is the challenge that we face as an industry. As weird as this may sound, they are not traditional spam. What you are experiencing is not the good old volumetric attack where a bad guy is sending 200,000 emails with a Home Depot coupon or Home Depot gift card, hoping that there is 5, 10, or maybe 30 people that click that link. Those were easy to stop. Volumetric attacks on the spam side are easy to identify. What you are experiencing are targeted attacks. The Home Depot one is sent only to you. Take a good eye if they don't mask the BCC piece, if they send it just to you. Put an eye on the next email that comes in. You'll see that you are the sole recipient. That alone, in connection with the fact that that email came from a well-reputed sender, like some randomly generated Gmail account, and the fact that there is literally just text in there trying to get you to call a phone number to dispute a charge or whatever, those are too close to legitimate email, which is also non-volumetric, which is always targeted between the sender and the recipient, talking about things. So this is exactly what you were saying there, the secret that we do on the AI side, trying to understand the difference between a legitimate email and a targeted attack that we can't catch with the more traditional spam algorithms. The sender that you report was used exactly once for that campaign that you received. They can't do anything to block Gmail or whatever sender it came from. So yes, they may have looked at that message. They may have come to the same conclusion that said, yep, Rick is right. This is a bad message. However, there is really nothing we can do short of blocking an entire email provider, because bad attackers can create their own well-reputed email accounts all day long.
Obviously, that then lends into the topic of social engineering that you were talking about before. And I understand that social engineering really is one of the major threats today, because it really is playing on that trust that you said people have inherently, and then trying to use it to do something even worse.
Oh, it gets even worse than that. If you think about it, we're not only trusting individuals, we also like to share. I have an example from my previous employer, and I'll change the names just to protect the innocent. We had a very, very, very nice director of accounting, and one day she came to my desk and said, I think I just did a boo-boo. I said, do tell, what did you do? And she goes, well, I got this email from our CEO. He was asking me about my grandchild, congratulating me on becoming a grandmother for a second time. Then he was asking me about my handicap because he follows my golf. Apparently, there is colleagues that told him about it and wanted to play with me the next time I get to Fort Lauderdale. And then he asked about payment to a vendor that we were late with a payment, and asked me if I could do this for him real quick because there was a contractual problem. And I did pay it. And afterwards, I had this weird feeling. So this just goes to show you that the attackers are doing their homework on numeric fronts. They are looking for their victim on, for example, LinkedIn. Find out who is in charge of accounting, of payroll, or what have you. Next thing, just go on Facebook and look for those names. It's surprising me how many individuals are posting public pictures of their grandparents, of them playing golf and what have you. And we were able to establish exactly the chain of events, what happened there. She was a classical victim of social engineering, and it cost the company $35,000.
And now my mind is blown. So immediately I'm thinking I need to scrub my social media sites. I'm really amazed that the hackers are taking this type of time. I mean, isn't that really time consuming?
It's all automated. We are not the only ones that are using AI. AI mechanisms are available dirt cheap, whether you use one of the public cloud providers or whether you use APIs that are available for the last generation graphic cards and have some resources to develop this yourself. But a solution for the attackers that would be able to scrape, say, the United States Yellow Pages and just looks for companies, correlates them to LinkedIn, tries to understand who's in charge of accounting, that can all be automated. If you put the tinfoil hat on, the good guys aren't the only ones playing with AI. The bad guys are as well. And all of a sudden, you realize just how mindful you have to be when you start sharing things that in one way, shape, or form could be used against you. Or you got to make sure that every communication in email that requires payments, that involves money, that involves anything confidential, either gets followed up by a phone call, or you have controls in place that ensure such communication cannot take place, which is where we're back at the good guys AI.
Is that an example of what you really need to do? I mean, it's really diligence to protect against these attacks, or are there other things that people can do to prevent these types of social engineering cyber attacks?
So the downside of email as a whole is that by now it's almost 40 years old. And there have been a bunch of bolt-ons, there have been a bunch of additions to the protocol, and additional features were introduced, et cetera, et cetera. But as a fundamental fact, email was never built in a way that it supports 100% confidentiality and 100% authenticity. So in other words, based on the traditional email standards, you will never be able to understand if a sender is really who the sender tries to be or claims to be. That said, this goes back to basics. When I was an email administrator, it was drilled into my skull by the trainers and teachers and mentors that I had that email is and still is one of the most exploited variants or vectors of attacks. There's some things that administrators can do. For example, make sure that your domain is set up to properly authenticate your email. Use SPF, use DKIM, and most important, use DMARC with a proper policy. What that will at least ensure is that your domain cannot be used to be spoofed or impersonated. You're protecting your name, you're protecting your customers against attacks that come from your domain. That is doable completely for free. There is no cost associated with it. It's just doing the homework. That's my $0 advice. After that, you got to start looking at best of breed layers. What layer do I want to have in front of my email server to look at the 0-day attachment-based attacks, to give me things like reliability improvement? If my mail server goes down, that gateway might be able to give you email continuity, and who knows what other features. The second layer that needs to be introduced is also, okay, if a message makes it through my initial defense, can I look for social engineering clues? Do I have a method in place that understands this fits in our communication patterns, or this is a one-off? Then who do I need to alert, or do I need to delete this message? The last layer is one that is very often forgotten, and that is, but what if something makes it through? Neither me nor my colleagues at other email security providers like to talk about that fact, but email security is not perfect. We're as close to perfect as we can be, but if a message sneaks through because it's a brand new social engineered variant, or it is something that is just so damn good that the AI has never seen it before, the message is now in a user's inbox. So remember, you need a third layer, and that third layer needs to entail not only the ability for a user to report this message as weird, but also give you as administrators the ability to pull this message out of your environment without any track or trace left, and understand if users have interacted with this message. Have they clicked on links? Have they replied to the attacker? Once you have those three layers in place, you're at a much, much better place. You have the protection in front of your server, you have the social engineered protection, and you also have, but what if something happens and I need to remediate a problem as the final layer?
Now, all of that sounds like it could be very complicated for an email administrator. We talk about these multiple layers. Are those, obviously, some of it has to do with training, some of it has to do with the system itself. How complicated is it to put this type of solution in place?
So I got a funny story there as well. It doesn't start as funny, but it gets better. A year ago, I had a healthcare system from the East Coast reach out, and they were hit with ransomware. They were not our customers at that point, but they wanted to know, what can we do to protect going forward? And I walked through our Office 365 protection suite with them. And the CIO jokingly said, yeah, if we can get this up and running as a POC in 2 hours, I'll sign the PO. And I was laughing, and I told him I accept that challenge. And it took an hour and a half to have everything set up soup to nuts with the 3 layers that I just explained, and also added backup and archiving on top of it. So from an implementation perspective, in less than 2 hours, we had that customer from zero protection into our 3-layer fold with consecutive backups and archiving. The complexity does not have to be visible to the customer. If you think about it, the customer does not need to go through hundreds of thousands of emails to understand what is good, what is bad. How does Jack normally communicate? How does Jill normally communicate? We do all of this automated in the background with the emails that already live inside of the Office 365 tenant of our customer. The training is done completely automatic. The policies are set up completely automatic. The only decision that an administrator has to make is, do I want to let the recipient know with a small digest when we found something? Or do I even forego that and make those completely disappear from the end users? And I, as an administrator, am the only one in my dashboard that can see these phishes. They are automatically mitigated, and no user is in harm's way.
Now, we're talking about protecting organizational email systems, corporate email systems. Daily serves the state and local government, so government email systems, educational email systems. You're able to implement things there. But then I'm not one of these people. But I happen to know for a fact that there are a lot of people that will check their personal email on their organizational device. Is there any type of protection that can be offered there?
That is a really, really good question. And you're on a great track there because attackers have realized that as well. All I have to do is find out the CFO's personal email address, and I'll send an email to the personal address from my CFO that basically says, hey, there's a problem with your corporate account. Please click here to reset your password. At that point, corporate IT had no way to look at that email because, as you rightfully said, it went straight to the personal mailbox of that CFO. So a CFO may look at that email and may not even realize on his phone, because of the unified inbox, that this message was sent to his Gmail account and not his corporate. So the CFO clicks on that link, gets presented with an Office 365 login page that looks a heck of a lot like the login site for his company, gives away their credentials, maybe even gets a multi-factor tick on his phone, and at that point, his account is considered compromised. The attacker now has access to the resources the CFO has access to, and corporate IT has never even had a chance to see the initial attack vector. Scenarios like this are a headache. And the way that we approach this is by looking at Microsoft's telemetry. When the AI starts to learn communication patterns, it also starts to learn from Microsoft's telemetry where every user logs in from. What ISP do they use? What corporate IP do they log in from? What device are they using? What is the fingerprint of the devices that they use on a daily basis? With the AI being aware of that behavior, now back to your scenario, the CFO gives away their credentials. The attacker, of course, tries to log in, but the attacker very likely logs in from a different device, from a different IP range, from a different country. At that point, the AI is going to yell and scream at the administrator to let the administrator know there is a problem. We just had a successful, suspicious sign-in from the CFO. It didn't follow how the CFO normally travels, where he or she normally logs in from. Would you like to lock this account down? And at that point, it gives the administrator the chance to fix the account takeover incident before the attacker had a chance to propagate throughout the environment, before the attacker had a chance to extradite information. It's part of our solution looking at Office 365 as a whole, but this is where email security starts falling into different attack vectors. Now we're not dealing with an inbound email that we had to prevent from. Now we're talking about the results that an email had that was sent to a personal mailbox of an employee.
If you're talking to an email administrator, and again, email administrators, you've got a million things coming at you all at once. If you had to summarize and give a few steps that they really need to focus on, what would your summary advice be to them?
If said email administrator is in Office 365, I would invite that administrator to run a free email threat scan. It not only connects to your 365 and gives you a historical report of targeted attacks that currently exist in your tenant, it also gives you a summary of your DMARC configuration to understand, is my sender authentication set up properly? It gives you a great insight into the kind of attacks that our AI is able to identify. And it basically allows prospects in this scenario to test drive the AI without any obligation, without any risk. Once that scan runs, it is a big eye-opener for almost all of my customers to see how widespread this problem of targeted phishing is. And then we can have a conversation to talk, what layers do you need to improve? Are you coming to me with a clean email server, nothing in front? We got to look at the whole 9 yards. Are you already using a gateway solution that you like? Can we add with the AI piece there? And at that point, it becomes an individual consulting that I've done with your SA colleagues, with a ton of customers from Daily. And that's my day-to-day job that I thrive in.
We could not imagine doing what we do without people like you behind us. Like you said, you are running into these types of scenarios consistently, and we just want to let people know that they're not alone. This isn't something that is only happening to one or two organizations. This is happening to organizations everywhere on an almost daily basis.
It sure does. Just to give you a little context there, we are filtering nearly 700 million emails every day through our entire email infrastructure at Barracuda. And the amount of dangerous materials, the amount of targeted attacks, the amount of spam is just mind-blowing. And if there is an interest, there is a good website. It's https://csi.barracuda.com. that will show our current threat status. We haven't touched upon one thing, and that is the good old boring backup discussion.
Backups are hugely important, and I can't speak enough about backups because I have seen plenty of organizations who knowingly or unknowingly lost tremendous amounts of data just because of one mistake, and it ends up wiping out hours, days, weeks, months worth of information.
I run into customers almost every day that relieve themselves of the burden of running their email in their own data center that use SaaS solutions for that. Almost none of them are aware that there is a shared responsibility model in place where Microsoft makes it abundantly clear there is no backup. And this goes for almost every other SaaS provider as well. They do not guarantee that you as customer have access to your data. In other words, if you backed it up on-prem, you gotta think about backing up in the cloud as well. You are literally one disgruntled employee away from losing your data. And there is a lot of third-party providers, Barracuda being one of them, to solve this problem. We call our solution here cloud-to-cloud backup. It is super simple to implement. Infinite storage, infinite retention if you so choose, and it gives your administrators the ability to recover stuff that was deleted maybe a week ago, maybe a month ago, and stay in production and keep your data secure from ransomware, from accidental, or from malicious deletion.
Thorsten, this has been a phenomenal discussion. I really do appreciate all the information that you shared.
Thank you so much for having me, Rick. It has been a lot of fun.
Thorsten, thanks so much again for being on the Technology Pulse. I have to say, you shared a lot of great information that I hope our listeners are certainly going to find useful. I know I did. Okay, time to wrap up this episode. Remember, if you're interested in finding out more about Daily, which you should be, or our strategic partners like Barracuda, which you should be, find us on the web at www.daly.com. You can also find us on Twitter and LinkedIn under our official name, which is Daily Computers. You can use that little @ symbol and make Daily Computers all one word, and you'll find us a lot easier. Now it's time for all that legal stuff. The Technology Pulse podcast is produced and presented by Daily Computers, Inc., and it is for informational purposes only. The information presented in the Technology Pulse podcast cannot be copied or rebroadcast without Daily's expressed written consent. We invite you to subscribe to the Technology Pulse to learn more about the host of technology solutions available from Daily and all of our strategic partners. If you have questions, comments, or concerns about the Technology Pulse, go ahead and contact me directly. Email me at ricko@daily.com. Until next time, this is still Rick from Daily saying so long.